Dovolte mi privítať vás na dnešnej konferencii s názvom Budovy A0, ktorá nadväzuje na predchádzajúce ročníky konferencií o pasívnych domoch. Pripravili sme ju v spolupráci so Slovenskou komorou architektov, s Českým centrom pasívneho domu a so združením Manifest 2020. Moje meno je Luba Šimkovicová a pôsobím v Inštitúte pre pasívne domy a v združení Manifest 2020. Budem vás dnes spolu s mojimi kolegami sprevádzať touto konferenciou počas celého dňa. Do agendy zvyšovania energetickej hospodárnosti budov vstúpil Nový európsky Bauhaus. Kým táto agenda vyvolávala v odbornej verejnosti určité protichodné postoje, častokrát oprávnené a častokrát zo strany architektov, tak Nový európsky Bauhaus so svojím kultúrnym rozmerom môžeme považovať istým spôsobom za novátorský svojimi myšlienkami a hodnotami. Hoci tie hodnoty nám nie sú nové, ale v kontexte zmeny klímy, energetickej hospodárnosti budov a znižovania emisí skleníkových plynov ich za novátorské považovať môžeme. Udržateľnosť, krása, inklúzia, to sú tie hodnoty, ktoré dnes budeme celý deň spomínať a hovoriť o nich. Som veľmi rada, že pozvanie na našu konferenciu prijali rečníci z rôznych kútov Európy, zo Španielska, z Rakúska, z Česka a samozrejme zo Slovenska. Vítajte. Som veľmi rada, že je dnes plno a dúfam, že ste pripravení diskutovať. Svoje otázky môžete klásť cez aplikáciu Slido. A teraz by som rada odovzdala slovo predsedovi Slovenskej komory architektov Iliovi Skočekovi, ktorého vidím. Ilia, nech sa páči.
Dobrý deň, prajem. Ďakujem, že ste prijali pozvanie sem do Novej Cvernovky. Dnešná sáda prednášok a diskusie je ďalším zo série podujatí, ktoré pripravila komora alebo na ktorých sa podieľala v tomto prípade pri príležitosti výročia, jubilea komory. Komora vznikla v 92. a tento rok oslavuje svojich 30 rokov. Okrem takých tých svojich obľúbených úloh ako vyberanie členského a riešenie autorských sporov svojich členov má aj zmysluplnejšie ciele. A jedným z nich je osveta a vzdelávanie a niekam do tejto sféry spadá aj celý dnešný deň, dnešná konferencia. My sme nechceli len parazitovať na konferencii, ktorú pripravuje IEPD Ľubica, tak chceli sme sa tak plnohodnotne podieľať, preto sme prispeli k tomu programu celým tým poobedňajším blokom, ktorý je takou reflexiou za cenou za architektúry za minulý rok. Nechcem mať nejaké akože predsednícke kázanie, nejak tu deklamovať, tak si prepožičiam alebo voľne interpretujem taký otcov citát. On sa vždy tak zahľadil za obzor a začal tak. Vieš, Iluško, architektúra to je taká poézia. Má to svoje pravidlá, svoju logickú štruktúru a gramatiku. Ale pozor, tá gramatika samotná o sebe nestačí. To potrebuje niečo navyše. Že žiadne slová ani vety spojené dokopy ešte poéziu nevytvárajú. A to navyše to tam robíme my architekti. To chce nejaký fígel, on to volal. Spomínam to preto, že ja som mal možno, že neprávom po minulé roky pocit, že táto konferencia sa sústredí hlavne na tie gramatické otázky. že ako determinanty kvalitnej architektúry si považuje hlavne hrúbku zateplenia, rekuperáciu, uhlíkovú stopu, nepríjemnosť. Ja mám mám veľký rešpekt všetkým týmto technickým a inžinierským parametrom stavieb, ale stále ich považujem za takú tú gramatickú povinnú jazdu, ktorá tam byť musí. Ale treba tam to niečo navyše, ten fígel. A preto som rád, že dnešná konferencia, ktorej téma je hlavne udržateľnosť, sa vďaka novému európskemu Bauhausu, že vďaka nemu dostáva taký nový kultúrny a kreatívny rozmer. Táto nová európska doktrína umožňuje alebo otvára možnosť baviť sa o celej téme udržateľnosti tak komplexnejšie a trošku inak. Na Slovensku má prísť veľký obnos finančných prostriedkov na obnovu budov vo vlastníctve štátu a samospráv. Viete si predstaviť, ako to u nás tuto na Severnom Balkáne môže dopadnúť? Aká hrozba nás číha? Preto som rád, že táto konferencia je a že pomáha zmeniť túto hrozbu na výzvu. Ďakujem pekne, pekný program ešte.
Ilia, ďakujem veľmi pekne, až si ma dojal, teraz neviem vlastne, čo mám povedať, lebo od konferencie, ktorú sme mali v roku 2020, pravdepodobne ten nový európsky Bauhaus, ale možno aj tie súčasné rôzne kontexty, v akých žijeme, aj v tvojej retorike urobili veľkú zmenu. Takže ďakujem ti ešte raz veľmi pekne. A teraz by som rada pozvala na pódium kolegu z Českého centra pasívneho domu, Tomáša Vanického, pretože v tomto projekte sme spoločne a nerozdielne. Nech sa páči.
Dobré dopoledne všem, dámy a pánové. Já bych velice rád poděkoval Lubici a vlastně Ivaně Nemetové, že uspořádali tuhletu konferenci osobně v rámci projektu Klimarchinet, který jsme uplynulé 2 roky společně tvořili a vlastně navazovali na Manifest 2020, který je zviditelně na Slovensku, a na deklaraci udržitelnosti, kterou jsme publikovali na webových stránkách Architects for Future .cz v České republice. V podstatě tímto projektem navazujeme na body, které jsou zde uvedeny, a jsem moc rád, že do projektu se nám podařilo kromě obce architektů zapojit i města, ekonomy a v podstatě i právníky, protože bez nich zkrátka ty technické parametry a mnohdy ani ta krása nedojde realizace. V podstatě chceme všichni asi mít budovy krásné, chceme je mít udržitelné a chceme mít energii na to, aby jsme tvořili i další opatření týkající se udržitelnosti, jako je hospodaření s vodou, jako je zeleň. Za mě energie je důležitá proto, aby architekt udělal krásný návrh, aby realizační firma udělala ten správný dům a aby uživatel si ten správný dům užil. Takže já doufám, že všichni si užijete dnešní konferenci, dnešní inspiraci, která přichází ze všech koutů Evropy, a těším se na další příspěvky. Děkuju.
Ďakujem pekne, Tomáš. Prvým rečníkom bloku, ktorý sa venuje novému európskemu Bauhausu, je architekt a urbanista Peter Beňuška. Peter, nech sa páči.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne za predstavenie. Teraz, keď ma už poznáte, tak ja by som rád troška spoznal vás, že s kým sa dnes budeme baviť. Takže koľko z vás sú buď študenti architektúry a dizajnu, alebo sú vyštudovaní v týchto oboroch? Prosím, povedzte mi. Takže drvivá väčšina. No a tak sa spýtam, keď už máme túto spoločnú profesiu, že či ste počuli o novom európskom Bauhause, je prvá otázka, potom príde ešte druhá na túto tému. Kto počul o novom európskom Bauhause? Väčšina. A tá zákerná otázka je, kto vie, čo je nový európsky Bauhaus? No, tak vidím, že je tam Norika, ktorá spravila spolu s ďalšími kolegami dohromady 4 videá, ktoré sú na stránke Komory architektov, ktoré hovoria o tom, čo je to nový európsky Bauhaus. Takže ak si nájdete niekedy čas, tak si ich pozrite. Ďakujem. Takže toto bolo vlastne moje predstavenie a teraz k tomu, čo sú hodnoty, pretože celá konferencia má byť o hodnotách. Vás poprosím, že zamyslíme sa na chvíľu spoločne, že tá vojna, aké hodnoty ničí. Myslím tým nie len straty na životoch, myslím tým nie len budovy, ale aj ďalšie hodnoty, aké ničí. A poprosím o chvíľu ticha pre tie zničené hodnoty a ľudské životy. Ďakujem. No a architekti predsa len môžu pomáhať v takýchto ťažkých krízových situáciách a tieto obrázky možno niekto pozná, lebo sú staršie z roku 2011 po katastrofe v Japonsku. Shigeru Bana tiež všelikto pozná a on založil VAN, teda Voluntary Architects Network, ktorej cieľom je pomáhať práve v krízových situáciách, takže vymyslel takýto systém, ktorý volá Paper Partition System a ten výkresík je veľmi jednoduchý, takisto ako aj zloženie je pravdepodobne veľmi jednoduché, ale o tom by o mnoho viac vedela povedať Ľubica, ktorá spolu s ďalšími kolegami to realizovala tu v Bratislave a takisto sa chystá realizácia v Košiciach. Tieto fotografie dokumentujú to, čo ste spravili tu v Bratislave a klobúk dole, ja som teda bol v Bruseli, tak som nemohol pridať ruku k dielu, ale klobúk dole, že v Bratislave to už máme zrealizované, aspoň prvých pár kojí, s tým, že celková kapacita je myslím 2500. No a teda dá sa povedať, že tá skratka, ktorú ja používam bežne, nový európsky Bauhaus, New European Bauhaus a jeho 3 piliere, tak sa netýka len Európy. New European Bauhaus je pre celý svet. Keď bola prvá konferencia pred rokom v apríli Nového európskeho Bauhausu, tak napríklad na nej hovoril bývalý primátor New Yorku, Bloomberg. Takisto tam hovorili aj ľudia z Indie, hovorili tam ľudia z občianskych iniciatív a tak ďalej. Čiže New European Bauhaus nie je len pre architektov a dizajnérov a nie je len pre Európu, čo je dosť dôležité. Aké sú tie inšpiratívne hodnoty? Všetci poznáme asi tie 3 slova, krása, inkluzívnosť a udržateľnosť. A ide o to, že či naozaj v dennej praxi pristupujeme komplexne k našim projektom. Títo ľudia tvorili tím. Títo ľudia po prvej svetovej vojne, preto aj som začal tým obrázkom z vojny, po prvej svetovej vojne založili vo Weimare školu architektúry, ale architektúra sa tam dostala, tak ako sme sa to učili. Ale ja som sa neskôr dozvedel, že architektúra sa začala na Bauhause učiť až po nejakých 7 rokoch. Napriek tomu, že tam bolo aj hodne architektov, ten v strede je z nich možno dnes najznámejší Walter Gropius alebo Marcel Breuer a všetci vieme, že neskôr sa riaditeľom tej školy, keď sa presťahovala do Dessau, stal Mies van der Rohe. No, títo ľudia tvorili tím a spolu učili rôzne profesie, ako som spomenul, architektúru až neskôr. Takže tímová práca je veľmi, veľmi dôležitá. Tento obrázok, ktorý symbolizuje spojenie tvaru a farby, poznáme, s tým, že len pripomeniem, že vo Weimare vznikol Bauhaus a tá kolíska je tam aj preto, lebo práve dnes, 13. apríla, Bauhaus vyslávil 103. narodeniny. Presne pred 103 rokmi sa narodil Bauhaus vo Weimare zo spolupráce jednak spomínaného Waltera Gropiusa, ale aj na Slovensku menej známeho belgického architekta van der Velde. Je to taká špirálovitý vývoj a veľmi rýchly tejto inštitúcie, tak ako sú špirálovité schody v tej budove, kde učili. Po 4 rokoch spravili prvú výstavu v septembri 23, teda v lete 23, a s tým, že študenti robili návrhy a tento návrh rodinného domu vyhral. Je to teda montovaný rodinný dom. Neskôr sa myšlienky Bauhausu pretavili aj do tých panelákov našich. Takto vo Weimare, v lokalite Amhorn, ten dom vyzerá, takýto mal pôdorys, čiže ten centrálny priestor, tá obytná izba, má aj horné osvetlenie takýmto zvýšením. Keď sa presťahovali do Dessau, tak Walter Gropius navrhol tento komplex, prvá zavesená fasáda, to všetko už vieme, takto vyzerala jeho kancelária, pána riaditeľa. Dnes je Bauhaus už vlastne len múzeum, pri príležitosti 100 rokov Bauhausu postavili nové múzea aj vo Weimare, aj v Dessau. No a dnes sa už pozeráme len v jednom z múzeí tých dvoch spomínaných sa pozeráme na Bauhaus s odstupom. Čo chcem len pripomenúť je, že Bauhaus bol veľmi krátke obdobie, 14 rokov. Koľko funguje fakulta architektúry pod rôznymi názvami? Ako dlho sa na Slovensku učí, tu v Bratislave, naša profesia, aj dizajnéri a tak ďalej? Takže poďme už k tomu, ako sa zrodila opätovne myšlienka pracovať spolu, together, alebo inkluzívne. Dnes sa k tomu pridalo trvalo udržateľný rozvoj, sustainability, a tú krásu, tu samozrejme pôvodný Bauhaus tam mal. Toto je pán, ktorý to vymyslel a prišiel s nápadom. A tu je 6 možných definícií, čo nový európsky Bauhaus je. No a ja by som sa vás rád spýtal, že k tej prvej tvorivé a interdisciplinárne hnutie, platforma, ktorá bola iniciovaná Európskou komisiou, je jedna z možných definícií, koľky sa stotožňujú. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Dobre. Ďalej, že je to spoločné hľadanie inovatívnych riešení. Tak, možno, že 10. Oficiálne sa aj hovorí o spojení vedy a techniky, teda to isté, čo mal aj starý Bauhaus, umenia a kultúry. Takže koľky? Áno, ďakujem. Ďalej, pre mňa hlavne, je to aj pozvánka k zmene prístupu a myslenia, hlavne nás. Nie celej verejnosti, ale nás, ktorí tvoríme prostredie. Takže vidím, že je asi tretina sály ochotná zmeniť svoj prístup k tvorbe. Ďakujem celej tretine. Toto je citát pani Uršuly von der Leyen, že je to duša aj nástroj na realizáciu Green Dealu. Takže kto súhlasí s pani predsedničkou, ináč, ktorá, chvála Bohu, dáva veľmi silnú politickú podporu. No a potom tá praktická otázka je tá, že bolo vytvorených veľa schém, ako nájsť peniaze na tie zmeny, ako stavať domy, ako tvoriť verejné priestory podľa princípov európskeho Bauhausu, to znamená, aby boli krásne, trvalo udržateľné a aby boli inkluzívne. Takže koľky sa tešia na peniaze, spomínali už aj Ilia, no najmenej, ale predpokladám, že keby tu bolo niekoľko developerov a hlavne miesta a obcí, takže tí by asi ruky zdvihli. Takže nový európsky Bauhaus nie je len o debatách, ako je tá dnešná. Je to iniciatíva, ktorá ale otvorila dvere všetkým nápadom z dola. A to sa málo vie a to veľmi chválim dnešné vedenie Európskej komisie, že konečne nedala spracovať nejakému úzkému okruhu ľudí nejaký návod na to, ako žiť, ako stavať, ale pýtala sa ľudí. To bolo 6 mesiacov, ktoré v kuse rôzne občianske iniciatívy a ináč aj občianske združenia dávali a napokon ich Európska komisia schválila. Tu je iný citát Ursuly von der Leyen, že NEP je projekt nádeje. Ja som rád, že Manifest 2020, že sme sa stali veľmi rýchlo členmi, oficiálnymi členmi tej veľkej asociácie rôznych organizácií, ktoré spolupracujú s Novým európskym Bauhausom. Sme oficiálnymi členmi, prvými zo Slovenska. Dnes je tých oficiálnych členov asi 300. Dosť rýchlo vyštartoval Nový európsky Bauhaus. Tu vidíme dátumy, že v priebehu prvého roka už boli schválené aj peniaze na to, o čom prvých pol roka všetci občania v EÚ, nielen odborníci, mohli hovoriť, čo by mal obsahovať, čo to je ten nový európsky Bauhaus. A takisto sa uskutočnila súťaž, ktorej výsledky boli v septembri vyhlásené a dnes práve budeme mať jedného z víťazov, lebo víťazov bolo 10, bude mať o tom prednášku v tomto našom prvom bloku. Som rád a teším sa na prezentáciu z Barcelony. Toto je nejaké úradnícke číslo, pod ktorým sa dajú nájsť spôsoby financovania, nielen obsah toho nového európskeho Bauhausu a keď je tu na niekto zo samosprávy alebo nebodaj zo štátnej správy, tak dávam do pozornosti hlavne tú tretiu prílohu, pretože za chvíľku prídem k tomu, že prečo, tak schválila nie len to, ale priamo aj prvé peniaze na projekty. Tu nám však vznikajú ďalšie, dnes už dávno vyhlásené finančné schémy a kóly, ktoré prechádzajú cez všetky možné vertikálne politiky, ako je kultúrne, kreatívne odvetvia, sociálny rozmer, vzdelávanie, digitálne, výskum, inovácie, priemysel, podniky, no a samozrejme naše územné politiky a zelená dohoda Green Deal. Toto všetko sú programy, v rámci v ktorých už boli vypísané schémy a kde sa môžu hlásiť záujemci o získanie grantov. No a toto dávam ako príklad, že komisia teda nie len umožnila priestor pre nápady občanov a mimovládnych organizácií, ale aj sama išla príkladom. Spravili sme veľkú architektonickú urbanistickú súťaž na jeden uzavretý blok v Bruseli a zvíťazil samozrejme ten návrh, ktorý bol najviac inkluzívny, ktorý vytvoril verejný priestor, kde sa môžu ľudia stretávať. O tomto sme už hovorili, že dnes už môžem povedať, že my sme sa stali prvým oficiálnym členom NEBu a prvú konferenciu na tú tému sme robili pred rokom, dokonca pár dní pred prvou oficiálnou konferenciou NEBu v Bruseli a mali sme tam aj pozvaných speakerov z Bruselu. Takže ďakujem vám za pozornosť a upozorním len na jednu ďalšiu výzvu, ktorá bola nedávno teraz tento týždeň spublikovaná, a to je táto, ktorá pokračuje v tej show, v tom raketovom nástupe. A všimnite si tú budovu, pretože o nej potom sa dozviete viac aj v rámci prezentácie kolegov z Barcelony. Ďakujem za pozornosť.
Peter, ďakujem veľmi pekne. Druhá prednáška, David Juárez a Merve Dadas. Veľmi krátko uvediem. David je architekt a zakladajúci člen spoločnosti Straddle Tree. Dlhé roky sa venuje rozvoju projektov občianskej participácie na obnovu priemyselnej a kultúrnej štruktúry. Pôsobí ako lektor na univerzitách v Európe aj v Spojených štátoch. Je zakladajúcim členom sieti Architecturas Collectivas a Citizens Lab a spolupropagátorom metodiky A3. Mimochodom veľmi zaujímavej. S projektom Approp Ciutat Vela sa stali víťazom ceny Nového európskeho Bauhausu, ako už Peter spomínal, v roku 2021 v kategórii modulárne, adaptabilné a mobilné riešenia pre bývanie. Dnes bude prezentovať spoločne s kolegyňou Merve. Nech sa páči.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for the invitation. Let's see. We have chosen this illustration from a friend, Pau Badia, a local artist, architect, and our collaborator, to show, sadly, what happens in Barcelona in the historical city center. If you have been in Barcelona, I'm sure you're gonna remember the La Rambla, that street, main street, which is connecting the new center and the old part. Very touristic, and nowadays under big pressure of real estate, because it's full of tourist houses and tourist attractions and stores. And again, sadly, this creates a big pressure on the real residents of this neighborhood, and they have to move because of the raise of the prices. They have to move other neighborhoods around, and slowly this neighborhood loses its soul without its residents, without local stores, and turning into another thing, but not the city center. So the intensity of red color shows the tension of pressure, again, the rise of the prices. This is the historical city center, Ciutat Vella, and this is the area developed in 90s with famous grid urban planning. This is the area on the coastline. Also old industrial area. Nowadays it's like full of universities and technology district, let's say. Pobleno, it's called. This is Gracia, a very popular area. And all around is slowly getting also getting this tension. And these pins are showing recently activated social housing projects, and we see how it's the distribution shows that like how it's more on the surrounding, and we don't really have so many projects in the city center. And some of them accumulated in some places, which creates more social problems. And this illustration shows how we want to create a compact city. Our strategy called A3 And a3.city is the website if you want to go check. This is how we find small urban voids. It's kind of almost a surgery to fill in the city where the public housing is really needed with different techniques, prefabrication, sometimes reuse of materials, and kind of gathering the lost functionalities of compact city. These are some techniques how to do it. Suitable filling, it's like you can put more floors on top of a building. Sometimes there are some empty buildings you can occupy, renovate, and give another life. Some paralyzed plots, it's always exist in the city. Like for some years, they're not used, but you can use them temporarily or permanently. And the exposed walls, like sometimes the blocks have empty plots which expose these party walls, which creates lack of quality in the building. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, okay. So, well, continuing what Merve was saying, like we have like several strategies, like several typologies of places of opportunity within the city centers. So we started to talk about, okay, sometimes we can make the building grow, so we cohabitate with the pre-existing, doing this kind of, like a rhinoceros and bird symbiosis. Sometimes we occupy existing buildings which are empty, and probably they could be, usually they are industrial buildings, but they could be other kinds of buildings, and then do like the crab, and filling them with life. And sometimes it's more like with this party wall you saw, like unfinished blocks, unfinished situations that you can juxtapose and somehow also help the pre-existing to be more like efficient, well, this diagram summarizes a bit what we're proposing. It's like first is always the people. First, it was always the citizens. It's a housing alert. We're dealing with a very difficult situation. We have only 1.5% of public housing in Barcelona, compared with Paris or Berlin, which might be between 15 or 20%, or Vienna, which is over 50%, I guess. Maybe you can say, okay, not strictly public housing, but also affordable housing, also kind of the NGOs or whatever, charities and cooperatives and so on. But this would make us like maybe a little bit over 2%. So 88% of the housing stock is just private in the market, and of course very speculative. So we're looking for this, the solution for the housing alert, and also of course we're dealing with an emergency, which is also like the climate emergency. So we're trying to do it in a kind of ecological way. So we recycle spaces, the spaces Merve was telling about. No, wait, yeah, okay. Of course, we have to check if they're suitable, and then if they're suitable, check to get the permission. Can be like a permanent occupation, or can be also temporary reversible occupation. Of course, then we have to enable the space, maybe some services, maybe some structure reinforcement, whatever, foundations, whatever is necessary. Then we like to introduce an industrialized process that can be not necessarily like the big building industry, but to make the construction process like smarter, and work with light materials, with ecological materials, in order that the small companies and even the dwellers can implement them. I mean, it's like also trying to focus into a small hands economy, into like a more fairer economy. But okay, the cycle goes on, so the neighbors can collaborate in fixing and tuning, in finishing some parts of the building, as we will see later. Then, of course, you have to live it, you have to maintain it, you have to take care of each other as a community, like together, not sustainable together, etc. But then it can be disassembled because this is like circular economy and it can always be like reused. Okay. Yeah, this is some of the studies we did along with Societat Organica, which is our environmental consultant, and it's comparing different building systems that could be suitable for this kind of procedure. Like we knew from the beginning that we wanted to have partly industrialized, partly prefabricated, off-site prefabricated parts of the building. We were dealing with 3D or 2D structures. We were dealing with, we considered concrete, but then we forgot about it because of the ratio of the, if you can see here, it's like, well, this is all the systems according to residuals, energy, CO2 emissions, recyclability, residuals, recyclability in different moments, absolute weight terms and energy, etc. So finally, we came out with the conclusion that metal and wood work very well, and we also had a look at the containers as they were like reused material, and we will see through the projects afterwards how we were fixing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I want to show some cases. This, we cannot see, but it's from New York, Manhattan, like from one of the most famous places in the world. And after our research, we see how many opportunities exist actually to fill in. This is like how it would look if you put in the public housing. This is the Poblenou area in Barcelona. We're back in Barcelona, the coastline and the technological zone. This is a research study done for the Department of Housing of Municipality of Barcelona. After this research, we found out that we can implement almost 2,000 new housing units, and the Department of Housing, they changed their plan according to this research, and they want to implement it. This is the historical center, Ciudad Vella, and this is La Rambla. This is the old port, and this area is like exactly how it was under the shadow of Zeppelin. Those are some public buildings. They were some like unused or used under their potential, and also we found out that we can implement 100 of units. And this is where we have our project Aprop, the built one, already built one, David is gonna present. And these are the volume.
Yeah, I mean, these buildings, one of them is a public school of languages. One of them is kind of a hospital, but it's a small one. The other one is another. I mean, we have like 3 more public schools with different characters. And after that, there's one is like a public plot, and the other one, it belongs to the Catholic Church. So it was just a range of opportunities within a certain area. I mean, these are 5 examples of buildings we pre-designed or we designed. I mean, 4 of them are in the way for their construction right now. I mean, one of them is already built. One of them is is being built right now. 2 of them are coming, and the other one are just like hesitating. Okay, so but it's funny because these proposals, we were not asked by the municipality to do this. We gave them. Maybe one of them was a commission. The other ones is more like product of the research. We propose not only that a building could go there, but also a design for the building. So if we go, yeah. Okay, this is one of them. This is La Ramblas, as Merve was saying, under the shadow of the Zeppelin again. This is the atmosphere there, super nice, but of course, it's under pressure. So, oh, thank you. So this is the lot we have. I mean, Las Ramblas are, this one, yeah. Las Ramblas are there, just there. I mean, like 50 meters away. And this is the lot, and as you can see, you have like exposed party walls, like losing energy, overexposed in summer, not really insulated in winter, and this patio, etc. No? So we had this lot, and we proposed this building, which one of the examples we were showing. And well, in this case, we used shipping containers. The program is simple. I mean, we have like this, like the ground floor is, oh, sorry. The ground floor was to be a public facility. The 4 main floors are housing, like emergency housing for evicted people or even homeless people. And then like the upper, so this is the ground floor. Now it's a vaccination facility, temporarily, because it's also, everything has to do with emergency and, you know. And this is like the typical plan. We are fond of this distribution, of this typology. This was more like an adaptation of pre-existing typologies. And after this first version, now the municipality is using practically like 90% this kind of typology, and they're mutating this typology. So it was also, I have to tell that not everything was perfect. In my opinion, the single typology is a bit too narrow, a bit too tight, and now they're changing that. But this other one functions very well. And okay, like let's see a bit like the process. These are like super used containers. I mean, if they were not coming here, they would probably go to be melted and start all over again with the raw steel. But instead, they were conditioned offsite, like we see here. They have some high standard features, like for example, like radiant pavement, no? Radiant floor. Okay. And well, this is a process. Meanwhile, of course, the offsite construction process allows you to prepare the, you know, like the foundations, the pavement, the services, the connections, and etc. As we were saying, conditioning the space in the diagram, no? And also another interesting thing about this is the use of standard twist locks as the main structural thing. That was a finding because, I mean, we've seen a lot of shipping containers architecture, but no one uses this, and we don't understand it because they're super fabulous, they're cheap, they're standard, and they're reversible. So this is a very important thing, because if the building has to be reversible, you have to reversible joints, no? And well, then, as you can see here, there was quite an expectation because it was not a conventional building. They were saying, what is this? Is this a performance? This is an extension of the port, or what is it? But on the other side here, you can see like there's a render of the finished building, which has nothing to do with containers as an image. And it was a bit like, okay, don't get scared because this is not like a bunch of containers. This is very, very well conditioned inside, and it's going to be very well conditioned outside, etc. But okay, what you could see from the outside is they're finished in the inside, like 90% of the works inside are already done offsite, but then from the outside they're a bit like shitty, no? But you can see that here you can see the plaster walls, the services, the glazing, whatever is practically finished inside. But outside you can see the young thing. So that's a bit. I mean, that was only 2.5 days, and it could be done in 2 days, like that, to stack the containers. This is something interesting. The whole construction work on site was 3.5 months. But then you start like to condition them in a way that finally this building has a double A energy certification. So it's like they always say if it's container, it's going to be precarious and so on. And that was something that they were saying all the time. I mean, we had like great defenders and great attackers. I mean, in terms of the building was quite mediatic, quite public. But you can see that how it's being transformed. And we used wood also. We used like polycarbonate. We used several materials in order to make them, I mean, as we were really very well, you know, helped in the way that we were working with this super consultancy. We were positive about the fact that the building was going to be extra efficient. But as you can see, even the international press started to say, okay, what is it? They're putting the pouring container tins and things like that. I mean, the article was not so negative. When you read the article, it was, we should see the result. Because that was also motivated because in the Great Britain, there was a program for homeless people with containers that was quite, let's say, shitty. So they were traumatized with it. So, but finally, this is the result. And well, I mean, it's like something else. You can see that it's a building. You can like it more or less, but it's a building with its dignity. It somehow responds to an environment. We will see a video now, so you can get inside virtually. And it's interesting because after so many fuss, like papers and television saying things about it, the fact that we won the Bauhaus, I mean, it's not, I'm not talking because of the ego. I'm talking about because of the process. I mean, a process that has to be controversial when finally gets like a bunch of prizes, like in this case, and especially an important special prize like a new European Bauhaus for housing, it's like something that is a validation somehow, no? It's like the end of the circle. Well, this is different images from inside, but I'd rather play the video, no? If it's possible. And this, you see, like the environment is super beautiful. You're in the center, and that was the whole idea, to right to the city right now, right to housing, but right in the center of the city. Because some of the people who are living here, their children go to a school which is over there. But they used to go to this school until they were evicted. And their alternative was to move like maybe 30 kilometers. But they could stay because the building is there. And the building is nothing special inside, it's just like housing. I mean, well, we will see it in the video. And you can see that like the actual neighbors right now. This is something on the TV because, I mean, they still talk about it sometimes. It's not working. Oh. I don't know. No. Okay. Well, I mean, maybe at the end we can go to YouTube. I don't know if it's not possible. I mean, that was embedded, but I think it was not a good idea to embed. Maybe it's better to have a link or something. Okay. Well, that's for this project. I hope we can see the video afterwards. Then we were asked to do another project that was a bit like they were asking, can you do something similar in a smaller town in the outskirts of Barcelona, some 25 kilometers from the center of Barcelona, which is called Caldas? And we said, okay, but if we do something there, it might be different because it's a different environment. So here we had the opportunity to introduce, I mean, we have also like a space of opportunity. We have an exposed party wall, but it's different, no? Because as you can see, like the tissue is different, the urban environment is super different. But we use the opportunity to introduce two things that are new in the process. One is mixing, I mean, one is a technical thing, which is, okay, we've been working with containers, but we were also saying that we wanted to work with wood and with other materials. So here, we can mix containers with wood, specifically counterlaminated wood, CLT, This is technically, but on the other side, we also wanted to improve to make it even more passive, and on the other side, finally, maybe we will tell us about certain participatory process that we involve, like the community and especially the young people who had to live there, because this is public housing for the young people, in the co-designing process. You will tell us about it. Well, let me. I mean, this is I mean, here what we are doing. We're building it right now. We're prefabricating right now. So we cut the containers sometimes, not this one, but the rest of them. So we use both parts, and then the rest of the structure is wood. So it's 50%, maybe a bit less than 50% wood, and the rest is shipping containers. So it's quite efficient because the shipping containers are like the vertical supporting elements and the wood is more like the horizontal in the middle. But on the other side, as we were saying, we took more time to explore like the potential of the building in terms of summer behavior and winter behavior, and we came out with some ideas that we discussed it in the participatory process. We also wanted to use like recycled wood in the exterior, like in this project in the Netherlands, the CLT, as we're saying, the containers, and Merve is telling us a bit about what happened then.
So we success about convincing the municipality to make the process participatory with the young people who are interested. It was during the confinement, so we did it online, the first sessions. We just presented the project, we asked about their needs, their problems. And then we managed to make it presential as a workshop. We also invited the neighbors, as you can see. They were a bit like, it was really nice for them also to learn why it's really necessary for young, like housing for young people. And here we talked about again their needs, about communal spaces, open spaces. Let's see. Yeah, here you see that they are telling us what to do, which kind of material they want to use. They would prefer what kind of activities they would like to have in the communal space. Yeah, about the management, I want to add something important. For example, in the preliminary design, we didn't design a balcony, but they insisted about that, like they really want balcony in their housing. It was a nice development in the project, let's say. We also talked about the management, like self-management of the building and the communal spaces. And for example, this scheme of management is designed by a youth association. So it was a really interesting study.
And it was finally adopted by the municipality, so it was successful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you see this was the environment. We also established, designed website where just for this project, where you can see how all the aspects of the project, the agenda, when is the participatory sessions. I mean, in short, you can find anything related about the process and the project.
And this is a sort of transparency tool. I mean, because it's a participatory process with a public budget. So everything is, under the lights for everybody to see. And it's in Spanish and in Catalan, it's not in English.
Also, I want to add that now we are doing another project called Wiki Housing, again for young people and a bit more progressive in terms of participation, because we are planning to build it together, like all parts, it's the prototype, and we are going to build with its future users. Like we should do it towards her, yeah.
Okay, so that was the result after the participatory process. That was a different project. It was, of course, and in terms of number of units, it changed because they sacrificed one of the units to make it a common space like this one. It related to the garden, so this is for everyone to share. And these are the units. These are the access. This is the access. This is a like storage space. This is like typical floor plan. Well, the thing is more like the process itself is interesting. And also we were introducing these ways of, I mean, we have some, like, if you see here, we have some houses facing south with a very good orientation. So in winter, they don't have practically any demand for heating, but these ones are facing west. So it could be improved by introducing these skylights that gather heat in winter, and they impulse it through some tubes to the dwellings beneath. And this is a bit like the result. As we were telling, it's wood, so it's very different from the previous project. So we think that any project we do with this methodology or with this philosophy is going to be super different, and this we like very much. This would be the common spaces, like the exterior common space looking into the interior's common space. This is the interior common space looking to the exterior common space, as we imagine it. We can see like a part of container here. We can see the wooden structure, like this is the real actual ceiling. And these are the balconies that they were asking for. Finally, they have them. And there are also like with the possibility a bit of having some intimacy because there are like sliding things, like these are sliding, so on. This is a house from the southern version, from the interior. Here we also see a bit of a container. We see so I think this is it's quite an honest building because we see like the structural materials. And we're showing that the structural materials are non-conventional materials, are not concrete, are not even normal steel. This is just a bedroom. Look into the balcony. And this is a video that probably is not working. So I think, no, and also we had our time. So this is a website of the project. Well, this is just to tell that we're working on this other project, Wiki Housing, that we look forward to tell you about it maybe next year or in a couple of years, because it's something even more radical. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Markus Zilker je zakladateľom a partnerom v ateliéri 1:1 architektúr. Okrem 12-ročných skúseností s plánovaním a realizáciou projektov bytové výstavby rôzneho rozsahu vyvinul školenia v oblasti mediácie a budovania komunít. Markus je zakladajúcim členom iniciatív für gemeinschaftliches Bauen und Wohnen a cohousingového projektu Wohnprojekt Wien, ktorý bol v roku 2014 ocenený cenou Stadtpreis für Architektur und Nachhaltigkeit. Veľmi často prednáša ako odborník na tému Baugruppen, cohousing a participačné procesy.
Thanks for the invitation. I don't speak so much Slovakian, but I thought you just mentioned that I tested COVID positive yesterday. So sorry for not be able to be with you in Bratislava. I'm sitting in my flat in Vienna, and I will share my slides and my thoughts with you from my flat. Yeah. I will talk about Vienna's co-housing model and give one example, which is called Crises. And I have to say, I really like one of your subtitles of the conference, Back to the Values, because I think it's really time to remember what are the most important values for us, because so the remote control is not working anymore. Oh my God. Yeah, I think we are facing similar challenges everywhere, and for me the presentation of the Spanish colleagues was quite impressive and inspiring, because I think we have to find different strategies how to cope with these challenges. So, of course, we face economical challenges like affordability and speculation. I think speculation is one of the most crucial points that we have to care about. Of course, we face social challenges like demographical challenges or diseases or refugee movements. But above all, I think it's still we're really in the middle of a climate crisis or in the beginning of a climate crisis. So I think the ecological challenges, they are the biggest ones that we are facing. Maybe compared to Barcelona, we are facing a quite different general framework in Vienna, because as David mentioned before, about 50% of the housing stock in Vienna is either owned by the city of Vienna itself or has been realized within this system of subsidized housing. So a quarter of all apartments is owned by the city of Vienna, and a quarter of the apartments is owned by non-profit developers. So we have 77% of rented flats, and as I mentioned, about 50% of all the flats, the whole amount of stock is strictly controlled, and there's no speculation with it. So that's quite a unique situation worldwide, I think, and it's very privileged, the situation in Vienna. And I want to give you a quick overview of a very specific method that was invented in Vienna 27 years ago, something like that. That's the developers' competitions within this system of subsidized housing. So, some things mixed up with this sheet. But we have underneath the city councillor, we have this very central organization in Vienna, which is called Wohnen für Wien, which was founded in 1984. And one of its three major goals is the development of new residential area with developers' competitions and touched by a land advisory board. And these developers' competitions, they are fixed price competitions, and they are judged by 4 criteria: architecture, economy, ecology, and social sustainability. So I can tell you about also co-housing in Vienna. Co-housing projects are projects that are planned by the users or by the future users in a participatory process. And they are inhabited and mostly in Vienna owned by these users after moving in. And these co-housing projects, as I told you, we have a very high percentage of subsidized housing, and these co-housing projects, they are mostly realized within this system of subsidized housing. They have normally in Austria, it's quite different to Germany, for example. They have no economic advantages to other subsidized housing because we have so much subsidized housing. Projects in Austria, they are mostly, you will find mostly a collective ownership. So we don't realize individual ownership in this project. So either an association or a corporation run by the users is owning this project. And that's quite important for preventing speculation. As I mentioned before, I think to prevent speculation on different scales and all the levels of, on all the different parts of the housing market is really crucial for everything, I would say. Yeah, and when you work with participatory processes like the colleagues in Spain are doing or we are doing in a little bit other field, then you come to the question how you look at the role of you yourself as an architect. And that's one of my favorite pictures, which I think it's from the 60s. and maybe you know this guy, and it's really, yeah, I think it's wonderful what Ms. van der Rohe did, but I don't agree to this role of the architect anymore. I really like his work, but I think the role of an architect today has to be much more in dialogue, much more working together with people. So in this picture, you would not even know who the architect is. Yeah, and nowadays we have the great privilege, I think, to know much more about how participatory processes can be successful. And in the 70s or 80s, we have learned a lot as societies how these participatory processes can take the time, but they don't have to last for 8 years or 9 years. And that's a quite clever book from Munich, Don't Be Afraid to Participate, the little ABC, which I can really recommend. Yeah, our office has specialized on these participatory processes. That's Katharina, the other Marcus, and me some years ago. And at the moment, we are 21 people from 7, or in reality, it's 8 different countries. And in our office in Vienna, in the Wohnprojekt Wien, so we are also working in a co-housing project. We work on quite different projects, and maybe half of it has a participatory focus, or yeah. So what do I mean when I talk about participation? How do we do that? We elaborated in the last years a quite complex process of this participation through different phases. So from really working on the vision of a group to the phase after moving in, so the phase of usage. And we are working with quite different methods. So that's a game that we play with founding groups, where they have to write the name of the project without seeing anything. Of course, we let them draw their dreams, their pictures of how this future life can look like. We are working with very different workshop settings, with smaller workshops to big group workshops with 60 people, 70 people sometimes. Here you can see a method that's called mood board, where people bring along their pictures that they imagine how the project should look like, or the atmosphere should be, or the qualities in this project should be. And we glue everything on a wall or on a window and discuss this common picture together. For example, here you can see a method which is called systemic consensus, which is about, or in this case, we distribute the flats within a building with this method. So all the members of the group decided together how to distribute the flats and where they would live in this project. Yeah, and so on. But maybe one of the most important parts of this participatory process is that in all these co-housing projects, we install a working group, which is called Working Group Architecture, Working Group Space, or something like that. And this working group normally consists of 8 people, 10 people, and they really work constantly with us. So we have in this 3 to 4 years of project development and planning and building, we usually have 40 to 50 meetings with this working group. Yeah, so to give you some idea of how these processes can look like. And we do, from time to time, we do excursions to other cities, to other countries, because we think it's quite important to stay in this exchange and to learn from others. So at the moment we are also doing a consultancy for Hungarian group who wants to implement co-housing in Budapest. Yeah, maybe I go on. Yeah, and what we did in the last, so we started with this this focus on participatory processes about, I think, 12 years ago, and we at the moment we are realizing number, I think, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we have really a lot of such projects. And what we did in the early years was also individual participation, but that where all the users could design their individual flats together with us. But yeah, in the last years, we are more focusing on these collective processes and less on the individual participation. On an organizational level, we try to care a lot about how this project are organized, who is communicating what with whom. And we try to communicate a lot with questionnaires, handouts, newsletters, and so on. And I don't know if you know that in Slovakia, but in Austria, within the last 10 or 15 years, there was one organizational form and decision-making method that really, I would say, was groundbreaking, and that's sociocracy. So this project are not, most of those projects are not organized in the basis democratic form, but in a sociocracy form. It's a organization method and decision-making method that comes from the Netherlands, from the 80s. So you can find it in the internet if you're interested in. That's quite a clever thing. Yeah, before I come to Gleis 21, I just give a short glimpse at two of the projects that we've realized before. Maybe some of you know that. That's the Wohnprojekt Wien in the 2nd district in Vienna, with a lot of common rooms, yeah. I have the privilege to live in this house, in this building, and we also have the office in the ground floor. Maybe later on I can tell a little bit about inclusion of people not so privileged. Yeah, the Wohnprojekt Hasendorf in Lower Austria. It's another co-housing project that we realized 3 years ago. Yeah, but not to Gleis 21. Gleis 21. Okay, the text is a little bit messed up. Okay. This founding group started back in 2015 with a vision workshop and with a vision with 3 sentences, which was living solidarity inside and outside the community, creating a sustainable life, and relying on social encounters. And maybe the most important thing here is to tell that this living solidarity, for example, means that they have within their association, they have a solidarity fund that they run themselves, which is giving space for, so they have realized 4 small apartments for young refugees from, and the Solidarity Fund is supporting this 4 apartments for young refugees for, I think, people from Iran, Afghanistan, and Egypt. And one of these refugees is also organizing and running their cultural space and event space in the ground floor of the project. So that was the founding group in 2015. Yeah, and as I think I used the word privileged already 2 or 3 times, and I think we are quite privileged when we can work in such projects, when we can be part of such project, because you need time and you need some money, and it's really important to share these privileges with others and not only caring about your own privilege. So nearly every, I think not every, but most of the co-housing projects in Vienna, they always have a clear focus on how to share their privileges also with others, with refugees or people in burnout and so on. And for example, in Wohnprojekt Wien, we have a Syrian family living with us in this house for 6 years now, and now an Ukrainian family, and also 2 other people in solidarity flats. Yeah, the system of sociocracy explained in another form. And when we applied with Class 21, it was a specific competition, if you remember, within the system of subsidized housing. It was a specific within the system of developers competition. We applied 2015 for the site together with the group of 20 founders. And we had a very strong concept that convinced the jury in the end. And this concept was to open up the ground floor and making a lot of cooperations with theaters, with cinemas, with a restaurant in the ground floor, and bringing all the common rooms that are exclusive for the group, bringing them to the attic. So Class 21 is situated quite near the central railway station. So if you come to Vienna, it's only a 10 minutes walk from the central railway station. And that's what it looks like. It was finished in 2019, and it has this, I would say, quite typical mixed use. So common rooms on the one side, but also commerce like a cultural space or an event space, and a music school in the basement also. That's the public ground floor I was already talking about. And we like to work with sunken courtyards where we can bring natural light to the basement. And in this case, it's the music school that is situated in the basement. So we can bring additional use and additional commerce spaces and common spaces to the basements. That's the function room and the event space in the ground floor. And Class 21 has a real broad range of cultural events. So when there's no lockdown, they have, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 events per month there. So concerts and small theater pieces, and discussions and workshops for the whole area there in the city. The building itself, it was realized as an timber construction. So starting at first floor, it's realized as a timber construction with CLT slabs and load-bearing timber walls. It has a wooden facade with a lot of individualization and a lively appearance in this facade through quite different balconies and windows, etc. Yeah, and what's really important for us to have these encounter zones that gives you the possibility to meet on a everyday level. So in this case, it's the access walkway. Where you can meet, where children can play, where some of them even go with their bikes. And on the top, on the attic, we have situated common rooms, like a small sauna and a small library and a very small office for the association itself, and playroom for the kids, and a common kitchen. So that's the common kitchen on the attic with a nice view to the park. And another picture of the terrace and this central building on the attic. Yeah, and this community kitchen, is used quite frequently for birthday parties, for encounters, for working groups, as this association consists of, I would say, together with the kids, of about 80 people. And they own their house together, and they are quite self-organized, so they run the whole organization together. They also have working groups that care about different things in the house. Yeah, what are the benefits of such self-organized projects and initiatives? For sure, one of the biggest benefits is to create lively neighborhoods and common spaces. You can share infrastructure, for example, also infrastructure of mobility. You can share cars, you can share e-cars, you can share cargo bikes, etc. Through this sufficiency, because you don't need a guest room, you don't need a big kitchen, you don't need maybe a bath tube because you have one on the attic. Through this sufficiency within your own flat, it's one step towards affordability. And affordability, maybe the most important thing is to prevent speculation, because nobody can ever again speculate with this building. Yeah, and we have participation in the planning process, which enables the people to be part of the whole thing. And of course, there's a community building within this process where people get to know each other and learn to believe, and learn to trust in others more than we are used to, maybe. Yeah, and that's pictures of another project. But through this, from time to time, we also do it yourself parts of the building construction. And in this case, the group did a part of the timber construction, hemp insulation, clay plastering, and so on themselves. So in Austria, we usually, or from time to time, we are working together, even in those projects, with non-profit developers. So they're not, some of these projects, they are developed by the group itself. Some of them, they are developed in a cooperation with a non-profit developer. And for them, it brings, above all, new chances in a market that they don't know, a high identification with the project, but also with the users, and an enhancement of their image. And for society and politics, I think it's quite easy to include and integrate people that are not so privileged in such projects, like refugees. And on another level, those projects, they normally care a lot about sustainability and alternative, the use of ecological building materials. Yeah, and when we come back to inclusion and integration, so maybe it's two things that I want to add to what I've already mentioned. One thing is that it's also important questions how elderly people, I mean, Veronica is not so old, and the picture is maybe 5-6 years old, but I think she's 70 now. It's also a big question how elderly people, after they have retired, how they can play a useful and senseful part in our systems and in our society. And it's not only about disabled people or refugees. It's also about us getting older, how we can be a part of this society. So Veronica is working, for example, in the small coffee in Bonn, and she says she cannot feel lonely and even useless or bored because it's simply not possible in her role in this house. And Michaela, who is lives also in the Homburg Wien, and she's a specialist for solidarity questions. And she also says that solidarity is within this co-housing project an everyday experience. So it's quite normal when you're like me, when you're tested positive on COVID, that you get help from your neighbors. It's quite normal that somebody asks you if he can cook for you or look after your kids or something like that. And above that everyday solidarity, I think it's really important to give space to people that are not so privileged, and as I mentioned before. Yeah, and that's it. If you want to know more about participatory processes, co-creation, anything else, please feel free to contact me. And thanks for listening.
Budeme pokračovať. Poslednou prednáškou pre diskusiou v tomto bloku je prednáška od architektonického štúdia KOGA. Prišli nás svojou osobnou prítomnosťou a prednáškou potešiť Alexandra Georgescu a Tomáš Kozelský. Pár slov o ateliéri. Architektonický ateliér KOGA vytvára podstatu vybudovaného prostredia, venuje sa projektom s pozitívnym dopadom na používateľov, komunity a miestny kontext. Prostredníctvom svojich projektov rieši problematiku neaktívnych štruktúr a ich adaptáciu na náhradné funkcie. KOGA je ovenčený mnohými cenami, v roku 2018 boli časopisom Archipreneur bolo štúdio vybrané medzi 10 najlepších novovznikajúcich architektonických štúdií. V roku 2019 zakladajúci partneri prednášali na RIBA, Kráľovskom inštitúte britských architektov, na tému alternatívneho prístupu k developmentu. V tom istom roku štúdio získalo hlavnú cenu za dizajn pracovného priestoru na udeľovaní cien Bixi za svoj projekt Distillery. Alexandra, Tomáš, the floor is yours.
So hello everybody, I am Alexandra Georgescu. This is my partner Tomáš Kozelský, and we left our third partner in the office to actually do some work. We are KOGA Architecture Studio. We are based in Brno with an office in Prague, so we are quite closely neighboring. As you mentioned already, we started our office in 2015. And since I have an audience of quite young architects and possibly some students and starting practices, I want to tell you a little bit a story of how we started the company. As you know, at the beginning, you don't really have a big audience of clients falling from the sky and asking you for projects with a lot of money. So rather than sitting on our desktop and doing architectural competitions, we found a way to do it a little bit differently. And I'm quite happy to see the previous presentations, because it shows a lot about how the architect's role is changing, and we don't need to do it everybody in the same way, but finding like your own DNA and practice architecture in the way that you want to do it. There's no right or wrong way to do it. So we found an old distillery factory in the city of Brno, which was further on a big success internationally, but it really started as small interventions within the building that helped us to activate it. We started with our own atelier inside of the space. Then we activated the little yard, so suddenly the building became a little bit like a semi-public space, and we started to create events there and bring the community around Brno into our building. And suddenly it became like more and more a community space that attracted not only local privates, but also institutions. So we had there a cinema. Thomas will talk later more about the project. But I just want to say that this kind of approach, which is very bottom-up and self-initiative, brought us later on a lot of projects related with the topic. So while we were running the building, some clients came to us like, hey, we have an old factory, we would like to put some, have a residence there, like apartments or community living. So it kind of like started that conversation in the city of Brno that before was not existing, I would say. And this led us to become kind of specialists in the field of adaptive reuse. And this is coming to the topic of today's presentation, which is city reuse. There is a saying happening in the world at this moment that we already have all the buildings capacity to fulfill all the needs of the residents of the planet right now. So even if this point is half true, we should still reconsider if we do need to build new. You know, so it comes to the fact that we want to, through our practice, we're trying to do it, but it's very minimum, the amount of impact we have. So we decided to publish a book that would be a manual of immortal cities, city reuse. And this is what we will talk about in this presentation, and it's the actually first time that we pitch the book, so I will be really happy to discuss with you any ideas that you have after the presentation. The idea of the book is divided into different chapters, 8 of them actually, where each chapter leads the reader through the understanding of what is a city reuse, and it goes from really small interventions. Can be like the reuse of materials, interiors, localized interventions through building reuse, and urban and infrastructure reuse of the city. And so it's like a scalable process. The localized reuse, the idea of localized reuse is on a level of an intervention. This is a project we did in Prague. It's a roastery called Grounds. And this is not about the interior reuse itself, but more about bringing inside the building an infrastructure that actually changes the function of the building itself. In this particular case, used to be a workshop, and now it's a roastery space. It was published in many magazines, so you might have seen it already. And the beauty of it is also that it was done by 80% recycled materials from our actually distillery project. And we managed to keep the materials from the project for a year or something in a storage. And then we designed the cafe, the roastery, through the materials we had. This is some discussion that we had yesterday at dinner, that is very important not to think only about the designing but also the process. You know, like what happens with the materials that we are using right now? Can we reuse it? Can we keep them? Do we have a friend with a garage where we can keep the material and use them later on? This is on the left side, the picture of the actual polycarbonate sheets that we're using to create this plug-in inside the distillery, and the wooden trusses that we kept. And then on the right side is just before the installation of the interior in Grounds in Prague, just to give you an idea of the processes. Another partial localized intervention that we are working on a lot is through kind of pop-up designs inside of old non-functioning buildings before they're getting activated. This is 2 different moments, 2 different years of an event called Brno Design Days, which I'm proud founder of. And on the left side is the Yalta Passage in the city center of Brno, which is actually now already activated. There are offices, completely refurbished, finished building, but that was like 1 year before they started to renovate it. And we built, and on the right side, is the Bochner Palace, also in Brno, again, just before reconversion. So we are, we brought in there the community of designers and creatives and activated the buildings with very small elements which changed the function of the building. So on the left side, we built a bar, which was connected with a catwalk for the fashion shows, which are part of the program. And on the right side is the design shop, again, built with really quick installations, really simple materials, and most of the times already reused before. When we talk about localized, as you saw before, it's not just about the interiors, but it can also be a facade. In this case, we work with a local developer, Tricai and Brno, to restore an existing shopping mall. And all we did from Koga's side, there was also an interior designer working on the project, but it was transforming the old, I think I have, the old Futurum shopping mall, which was a parade of logos and graphics of all sorts of international brands with their own color scheme and design, into like a unique form that was that kind of what we always said when we drive around a highway. It's kind of located in between on the highway towards Vienna, and it feels like the city starts here. Like before, the shopping mall felt as if it was an outskirt buildings without any meaning, just kind of an advertising. But suddenly you see from the highway, okay, there is a building, there is an architecture, there is a care for this place in closer to the city. So it brings it back to the city. And yeah, I think this is, I'll let the word to Thomas, and enjoy.
So, yeah, it works, perfect. Thank you very much for having us here. I'm going to continue, even though I speak Czech, I'm going to continue in English, because as Alex introduced, we are trying to kind of present first 4th chapters of a book we are preparing. And we hit the stone with the fact that like Czech and eventually Slovak language is not really fitable to describe all the principles we would like to talk about. So I'm going to, for now, restrain with English. Before I start, I would like to say to David and Merve, I mean, absolutely fantastic work, and I'm like feeling so inspired. So tonight I'm not going to sleep, I'm just going to be sketching because, wow, it's fantastic. We applied also to the award of New European Bauhaus, and now I fully understand we didn't win because, thank you. So speaking about chapter 3, building reuse, I'm going to be a little bit walking, I'm a walker. We are right now, this year and last year, we are finding out that more than 70% of all the projects that our studio is doing is adaptive reuse. It's basically like we're taking an existing structure, giving it a new function. The thing is, both of the presentations before were always talking about like somehow changing the city, showing the percentage. We are not going to be today talking about like actually changing the volume, the build-up space of the city, because we are actually using the structures we have. So there is not much of new build environment what we are going to be presenting. And whenever we are doing these principles, we are using like 4 main steps. The first step is always to evaluate the convertibility. You're mostly having a client. Sometimes we're trying to play the client for ourselves, but in most of the projects, it's somebody coming from the outside. He's telling us their needs. They're showing us the building they have. And we're actually like trying to tell them if the building is able to contain the function that they are like trying to place inside, what are the restrictions, and then in the end, we're going to kind of find out how to do it. I'm not speaking just purely about this kind of like a structural, technological check if the building can withstand it, but also like trying to find out and evaluate the programs that are happening inside. You're bringing, for example, more users. You're having a residential part and you're having a commercial. Are we able to put these two programs together, that they are not colliding, that they are not affecting each other in the bad way? Second step is zoom on added values. The biggest advantage of existing structure is that they probably happen in a different time, and most likely there was a different law regulation, there was different condition, financial possibilities, or maybe they were just wrong and they created a mistake in this kind of urban texture. But those mistakes might be something that you will never be able to repeat again. Try to take it, try to embrace it, find the smallest thing, because this is the real added value, not what the developers are coming to you and say, hey, we would like to have a new build and we would like to put their added value. Yeah, it's gonna be something special you are gonna create as an architect, but it's gonna be without a story. Here we have a genuine story. I can stand in front of the window that we maintain to keep there and I can be speaking about it for hours. I will show you exactly this example. Third step is design your operator. It's always really important to be like a part of the community within the cities that you're working with. Try to find and define your clientele the way that you know them. You really deeply know how they work, but not only within their workplace, but how they actually spend their free time, what kind of community they try to attract, how they kind of work as an organism. And if you understand that, you can create a place that is going to be like really able to fulfill their needs. It's a thing that we're doing a lot. I'm going to speak about it closer. And the last step is let it grow. We understand city and also the buildings and most of the programs that we are applying as organisms. So it's very important not to create a very rigid structure that can be used only in one way, but always give there a little bit of space, of a flexibility that, especially within a time, can adapt to the needs of the city and of the users, or eventually like exchange the users. You will build something, they are going to find that you really didn't fulfill their expectations. They might leave it, but once you actually invested into putting there the functional infrastructure, you turn the building into something functional, there might be another user that will appreciate it. Thank you. So this is a first project. It's very good to speak about this, mostly from these two first points. It used to be a part of a huge industrial, let's say, complex. It's next to the river, next to the bike lane, newly developed area. This picture is actually taken from a side of a river, and right behind the back of the photographer is Budovy, which is now the biggest development we have in Brno. So it was basically a building that is going to be fully reacting on this like new thousands of flats and new inhabitants coming into the area. Right next to the building there is planned a new bridge which is going to be connecting Budovy with this shore. And it was a corner building, so it was basically creating this kind of like a partition between the public space and the inside of the complex. So it was acting very, let's say, impotent towards the public space. It was like trying to create a barrier. It was used as a space for light production, later on for storages. For a few years it was used for like some high school focused on production. And we were given the assignment to turn it into a residential unit. It was actually, the client was a Baugruppe, so it was like a group of the future owners of the units. But we were having like two big issues that we were like trying to actually evaluate if we are able to solve within the program that they are wanting from us within this building. First of the issue is we were not allowed to build in the area purely residential buildings. We had to create something of like the citizen equipment, meaning like having some spaces that can work in a different function. What was very difficult was actually open the building into the public space to give the direct entrance. That's the thing that you can see. Wait, I have the laser right. So you can see here the opening. it was a big issue because we were placing the common space open for public, for the commercial usage as an offices down there. But as you can see, it's a space which is half in the ground, and making a staircase that is leading you down directly as an entrance from the public space where you cannot go out and make the stairs like already inside of the pavement was very difficult. But the building, thanks to the structural system and thanks to the way it was built, allowed us. So we were like saying, yeah, we can apply this kind of citizen equipment. The second thing, we are in the flooding area, and we were not allowed to send the rainwater into the sewage or into the river. So here we came to kind of solution. Client wanted a green roof, but they wanted intensive. They wanted a common garden where they are going to be spending their time. Then they saw how much it would cost. So of course they said, hey, we cannot afford it. But actually, when we start like negotiating with this institution for taking care of the rivers, we were given a ban, like we can continue, we cannot take the water away. So the only thing we could do was basically put there actually really the intensive green garden to slow down the passage of the rainwater, which takes 3 days. We are like calculated 3 days before the water after raining on the side is actually getting into the water. So the green roof was absolutely essential for this project to happen, and we were basically given the upper hand above the client. He had to actually invest into it. So that was one of the solutions. This is the project distillery we spoke about, or Alex spoke about before. This was our first big project. It was all distillery in the city center of Brno. It was hidden inside of their inner yards. Originally, it was a brewery plus the production of jams combined together. The brewery was belonging to the monastery, which was the first institution historically able to brew a beer. They kind of used a hill just behind the building to use this kind of gravity process. Is fantastic. And then they combined it. It was bought by a Jewish family in the end of the 19th century. They were quite famous in Brno, Deutsch, but actually all of them ended up during the Second World War in concentration camp. And there was basically 7 buildings combined together, but 6 of the 7 buildings are now not demolished but fallen apart because nobody took care of them. And this was the last one, which was actually just before being demolished. But we managed to convince the owner of the building that we are gonna be paying a little bit higher rent than the ruins or the debris, which is gonna remain afterwards. And they agreed on actually giving us the building for 400 euros a month. So we had a building like that. No electricity, no water, actually no windows. So all of the things that you see there, those basically we reglazed it, we bring the electricity, bring the water. And since we didn't have any money at the beginning, we start doing this kind of process of like rising a quality of a space step by step. So we started with, because we had here one space, here we had like the central building, and here we have 2 upper floors. So we started with this space. It was like a smart decision because on the other side of the space was a pizzeria. They had the oven there. So this was perfectly heatable space. So we started there, we made a flat floor, we started refurbishing it. Then we continue into this huge space, which was like hidden inside of the building. This is what you see here. First, we just cleaned it up, and for 1 year we had there only events like small gallery exhibitions. Second year, actually, it was already known, so came the local cinema, and they said, hey, we're gonna be refurbishing our building, we need somewhere for 4 months to have a refuge. So we said, hey, if you're fine with this space, just like, let's get in, we are gonna accommodate you there. So they came in, we managed to install better infrastructure. The black things which you see around, it was like a special rubber that was like taking away the sounds. Here was like a huge screen, something like that. And it was actually a space for approximately 60 people. And for 4 months it was working. They actually had a demand on creating a bar. So the guys we addressed, they were like, hey, yeah, we can do a bar, but the problem is that we need to be on the ground floor. We had our office here, that was the only entrance to the big space, and we didn't have any other space on the ground floor. So we actually managed to purchase an engine to push down this the cabin of the elevator, and we turned the elevator into the bar, which was like every day they came, they opened the doors, moved the bar outside, and that was basically the smallest bar in Brno. It was called 5 square meters. And it was basically using as the lobby of the cinema was this super tiny yard, which is very important because it was tiny. There was only one car to be parked inside, but the owners didn't permit anybody to park there because everybody would argue who's the one who should be parking there. That's why that's why the yard stay not turned into a parking lot. And after the 4 months of having the cinema, we had all the space prepared and ready and so well known, and we had like so huge community that there was like a push to actually turn it into places where people can come and work. So we turned it into co-work space. We partially divided it. We had a big meeting room down here. We had like some working tables up there, kind of common room, and from one side a little library, and from the other side a kitchenette. Perfectly sufficient, but we had only 5 years contract. When the owners find out that it's actually working, they asked for 10 times higher rent. So we couldn't afford it. We left, and what you saw before in the grounds was kind of like a part of the reused material we managed to take from here and use it in another project. This was the upper floors, kind of multifunctional space. Here we had a studio for a fashion designer, which is quite famous in Brno. And from the building reuse, we are having the third one, which is Kunst. I'm going to just go very quickly through it. Kunst is a creative and cultural hub newly built by South Moravian Innovation Region in collaboration with the local university and the municipality. But Kunst is very important for us because all the community we created in a distillery and their, like, let's say, offspring is now actually relocated in Kunst. We were lucky to actually be able to create for them their ecosystem. We were with those people for a very long time, so this is what I was like talking about, design the operator. South Moravian Innovation Center approached us approximately 2 years before we were finalizing the design of the space, and we had this like absolutely fantastic opportunity to go through their innovation process, that we learn how they work, and they were kind of like following our work with the community for 2 years to actually understand how they should design this kind of like a base for the creatives and cultural industry in general. And what I was talking about added value, these are light wells we found under the suspended ceiling. They were like from bottom, they were covered, but also from the top. There was like multiple layers of this kind of like asphalt sheets, totally destroyed all the Luxferry. It took us a lot of fights to actually be able to renew this light wells. But can you imagine this corridor, which is like extremely long, connecting with another space in the back, being only of this height, extensive width, but without any daylight, that you have to continuously like have there the lights on, consumption is high, and the space is very, very dull. And we were able and very happy about actually bringing the original value of the building back. This is a little bit the story of Let It Grow. On the left side, what you can see, this is a picture before the actual opening of the space. It was another Brno Design Days, and we were given the space, we designed it, to actually show the future user how to actually accommodate it. Okay, guys, you sketched something and you're saying it's going to work, but show us. So here you have it for your Brno Design Days, and give us all the understanding how the people can commute through the spaces, how they can use it. So that's approximately half a year before actual official opening of the space, and this is how you can see the space right now. So you see the differences. Here we don't have lamps, here we have. Right now there is a huge exhibition, so the space is never that empty, but it's being used by designers for their events. And again, here you can see it, preparation during the Brno Design Days without the finishing. Here you see one of the units made for the local businesses. These are florists, Kvítka v bytě, after they actually refurbished their space. By the way, the girls are working with us on many projects. They are like designing for us all the interior flowers and plants. And they've been in our buildings for more than 3 years, so we know like perfectly what they need. They communicate with us on like totally different basis than a classic client or user with the architect. About the public space reuse, this is like just a topic. I'm not going to go that deep here, but public space reuse is for us also important. It's a little bit different point of view, because public space is basically any space inside of the, let's say, public realm, which you can enter without any restrictions as a public. So we are finding out there is a lot of like urban voids, a lot of spaces, a lot of these kind of situations that David was introducing during his presentation. And this is actually in Spain, in Logroño, during the Concentrico Festival. And we were given amazing opportunity. There were like a lot of places around the city, these kind of fantastic spots in front of churches with the views and so on. But those were already taken. So we were like given the only opportunity was like, hey, there is a parking lot. And I'm like, okay, let's take a parking lot. It's in between buildings, the building in between fall down. Somebody put a concrete. Yes, sorry. So you can see it before we came, and then we were given for 1 week this opportunity. And we were thinking, okay, we have the space, and it's a space that is suffering with the overheating. You basically created a cave that is collecting an enormous amount of sun. It's the north of Spain, but it's still Spain. And we came there, and the idea was, let's create a park. But what are the qualities of a park? It's a place that you want to stay, and this was not a place where you want to stay. It was like this kind of like a place where you in the evening might use it as a bathroom. But it was unshaded, it was without a good climate. In the evening it was kind of dangerous because it was this black hole. There was no furniture. If you imagine that you want to create a square, it's going to take you years. You as a municipality are going to buy a small tree, you're going to plant it there, maybe the tree is going to die, then you have to replant it again, you need to water it, and after many years, finally the tree is going to start casting a shadow, making like more pleasant the environment. Taking benches, put them there. So we actually came with the idea. We already used it on a project before, but we created this 14 meters in diameter ring. It's 4 meters high, and we're putting it on this kind of plywood base. And you can build it within 2 hours. That's the speed. And we are actually working with the fact that it casts a lot of shadow. The 4 meters high structure is actually creating this kind of very pleasant shadow. It's not like a full dark shadow as you have with a full structure, but it actually reflects a lot of the sun. It is kind of like, thanks to the fact it's inflatable, it really well reacts with the wind, so it kind of deforms, so it can withstand even higher loads of the wind. We just inserted inside very low consuming illumination strip, so it actually works as a public illumination. It generates this kind of like a omni but very soft ambient light, so it's fine even like to have it next to residential projects. The construction contains the benches, so people are like, before we finished it, they were coming to the side and actually using the benches because suddenly the street next to us was way too long without any public furniture, and even like elderly people were like, wow, I have a place to sit and to rest a little bit. And it also gives a quite enormous sense of safety in the environment. So we call this project Budovy A0. Later on we turn it into English Air Square. and now we managed to productize it. So this is like our first prototype, but now we officially have it as a product that we are offering to the municipalities for this like quick activation of the public spaces. And we are looking in another possibilities, for example, like adding a roof and turn it into this kind of like a small market space and so on. Here you can see this is the final product. So we're like having much more detailing in the plywood legs. The top is basically the same with like some small changes. So you need only one plug. Yes, it's still depending on like some electricity infrastructure, but it powers the fan. It blows up in like 10 minutes. So like to build something like that, it's no problem. You need one car to bring it on the side. And within 2 hours, it's built up. Within 1.5 hours, it's removed. So the usage is actually really focused on the urban voids. And here, this is like another thing. This is basically the impact. That was the first place where we built the Air Square. That was kind of like 2 buildings next to each other from both sides, surrounded with the roads in Brno. The thing was, there used to be this kind of like a metal units which turn into kind of like a marketplace, but later on it degenerated in this kind of space which was kind of enclosed. Inside they were dealing drugs. The city was like having a bit issues with that side, so they first removed the units, and then there was like, hey, we need to do something about it. So they addressed us. We put there the Air Square. It started working, so you saw the impact on the city if you turn it into an actual square. And the city, after removing the Air Square, turned it into a square. They changed the bases now. There are like a few trees, there are some benches. But the position between the buildings actually was lacking one thing. We're calling it the urban pin. A place that will not only bring you to the side, but it's going to keep you there for a little bit. But all the facades we have around are blank. There is no function that would directly communicate with this public space. So we addressed local bar, 4 pokoje, from bar that doesn't exist. Super funny guys. You can really experiment with them. And we created this box, which was there for a year. It was kind of like an urban proof. So we had this, as you see, the structure. It's funky and nice, it shines in the colors and so on, but we put this mesh around it, like nobody vandalized it. And if they decide to climb on it, it's still able to load to bear the load, sorry. And the thing was, like, we had 2 pieces. It's okay, it happens. So we had 2 pieces, and like every morning 2 girls came in the corners and they like used this kind of wrench. It went up, they had a bar inside. In the evening they pull it down, it went down, and you had something that you can stand around. It's kind of shining and pulsing. Not all the features were in the end installed, but still it was a very nice project. And actually after this, suddenly another cafe appeared around the corner, and now I would say that this kind of square is like really lived. So this kind of the public space reuse is, for example, being led in this kind of like show the city with the temporary interventions, where what it needs, and the city is like, hey, actually, yeah, we can do some opening, we can permit some user as a cafe, like in some of our buildings. We don't need to use it as a bare land. And the last chapter is that I'm going to introduce today is district reuse. We were just announced, it's not officially out, but we found out we are the 3rd prize in the competition for reuse or adaptive reuse of this big factory in Šlapanice, very close to Brno. We collaborated with a Swedish studio, Schillander Hebe, and Italian and Dutch landscape designers, Open Fabric, absolutely fantastic experience. And basically what I was like trying to say, we are very often encountering the moments when somebody speaks about adaptive reuse and they're saying, hey, we are having a factory, we would like to adaptively reuse it. So the idea is we demolish it, we keep one building, and this is the adaptive reuse of this kind of industrial area. For us, when we're speaking about the adaptive reuse of a district, it's very important the the urban logic inside there. There was already working some program. It was generating an infrastructure as a roads, as a passages, and so on. And this is the essence. Like adaptive reuse of a building was a different story. But if we are speaking about the districts, this is the focus, like the urban quality. So what you can see here is basically this, and this part are the only three maintained building in the way they were, just like adapted for the new function. But everything you see around here, all of these buildings were newly built, but exactly on the floor plan of the existing buildings for us to kind of preserve the urban value. The city was somehow working, the inner part of the district was somehow working, and we just did the exchange that instead of whatever their movements inside were and whatever the means were, like if it was a forklift, here this was a train coming inside of the area, we exchange it with our new functions. We want pedestrians to walk there, so we are using the infrastructure for pedestrians. Railway has a fantastic inclination, so it's perfect to turn it into kind of like bike lanes. We didn't do it here because we were connecting a bike lane from here till here, so we're like keeping it on this side. But this is the essence. We just want to say through this chapter that it's very essential to think about what was the original DNA of the site. It's not about demolishing it and like preserving two buildings or their facades and say this is the restoration. And this is the last project that I'm going to show you today. It's just quickly this one slide. It's another story. We are also like encountering a lot of understands. This is giving me a sign that I should like this kind of overlighting. It's basically understanding that the industrial heritage is not the only one to be restored. This is a research center from 60s in Brno. Later on it was like redeveloped later on in 70s and so on. And we were asked to make an alternative proposal for the developer who's going to be turning it. In the end, they're going to go with demolishing and building some new high-rises there, but they wanted to know how they could actually use those existing buildings, what would be the capacities and what would be the expenditures. So you can see the original design and our just very gentle extension above the original figures, but keeping it as it was. And I think like always trying create the alternative in every approach to evaluate every single building and urban structure with this first seeing what we can turn them into and then kind of evaluating the convertibility, if it's sustainable, if it's economically viable, if it's actually hidden heritage, added value inside there is absolutely essential. And I think every architect should at least make at the beginning like this kind of like a quick evaluation. Thank you very much for your time. And I heard that we're going to have like some discussion, so I guess there are going to be questions. Thank you.
So first I will thanks to very nice presentations from B and B cities, Brno and Barcelona, here in B city, Bratislava. So congratulations to your works, and I hope that there will be some questions. We got already
3.
So guess how many questions are in Slido? So 3 of them. So please try to use Slido for questions. Yeah. So Lubica, I don't know if we could use the first one or so. Yes.
Okay, P.
The first one is about Barcelona. What are the conditions for new developments in Barcelona? Is there joint investment by the building owners? Why are they hesitating to implement the projects?
Okay. Yeah. What are the conditions of new developments in Barcelona? Well, you have like all kinds of developments. we were talking more about how to introduce the affordable housing, and if we stick to this subject, affordable housing, we have like several formats of it. Like we have like the strictly public housing, like the social housing made by the administration, like could be mainly the municipality, but also like the regional government. On the other side, we have like cooperative housing, like co-housing based in permanent cooperatives that are, of course, are considered affordable housing because they are out of the market. And we have increasing projects of cooperative housing these last years, and very interesting because they tend to introduce environmental high standards and participatory processes, as we were saying in Vienna. So it's kind of a very interesting. And on the other side, we have like a policy of kind of a private-public cooperation to get to develop affordable housing projects. And this is something that we have recently. There is a new agency to promote specifically this kind of projects. And it has, I think it has to do also with the Green New Deal and all these kind of things, no? It's like, until recently, at least in Spain, especially in Barcelona or Catalonia that we know better, there was not such interesting situations combining public initiative and private initiative, no? Private companies collaborating with municipalities and so on. But now we see like there's a new framework, new institutions, and I think that also the European action is influencing very much, pushing this to happen.
Yes, you mean European action, new European Bauhaus, which is not just European. Yes. So I have a question about affordable, because you told that you use old containers. They are given to you for free?
No, they used to be very cheap. They're not anymore after COVID, and they're still cheap. But they were that cheap that you can compare the price of a container with the price of a scrap. You understand the scrap, no? It's like used metal. Of course, scrap in Spain is about 1/5 or maybe 1/6 of the price of a new metal. And the containers, when we started to use them, were about 1/4 of the metal. So they were really, really cheap. So we started to use them because of this opportunity. In one project, they were given to us. One project. The rest, I mean, the developer has to buy them of the construction company and so on. Yeah.
Okay, here we have one question for all 3 presentators, or 5 presentators. How would you describe the difference between adaptive reuse, and transformation? So please start.
Yeah, it's kind of like a transformation is one of the things that like the kind of method or a tool that we are using in adaptive reuse. We are basically having we are having 3. It's transformation, intervention, and modification. It's a thing that transformation is for us like a bigger change. The intervention, that was what Alex was speaking about, it's like this kind of a partial adjustments that you turn a facade. When we're like turning the facade of Futurum, of the shopping mall, into something new, we were trying to kind of like fragment it to make it more closer to the urban scale. and actually it's turned red to yellow. The problem is that the building is kind of like at the crossroad of two highways, one leading to Prague, another to Vienna, and it's like very far away, even though we are passing very close. You need to take one turn, another turn, and then actually find, and you realize when you have a curved building that you're getting lost very easily. And people were saying, hey, I was trying to get to Futurum and I ended up in Vienna. And the thing was that we start playing with the color scheme, just going from the red to yellow, and the yellow is actually saying, hey, here is the entrance. So wherever you are at the highway, wherever you are finding yourself, you are recognizing the yellow is your point where you're trying to hit, and the red is just like trying to show you with a gradient how to get to the yellow. This is for us like the intervention. The building is staying the same, but you're just using something extra. If we're speaking about transformation, we are going to be talking about making like a big section inside of the building, like in the physical structure, and like putting there an extra function that is going to be highlighting the same meaning. But we couldn't do that because of a certain economical setup of the developer. But transformation for us is like something smaller that belongs into the methodology of adaptive reuse.
Thank you. I like very much also introduction of colors in this transformation, which is very important and not so much seen in our geographic area. So perhaps, Markus, may I invite you to give your opinion on difference between reuse and transformation, please?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. In my understanding, I have a very broad understanding of transformation. Like if you know Rob Hopkins, who has invented this transition town movement coming from England. And so for me, this transformative process, I understand it in a very broad sense. So in the moment we are working on a transformation of old housing complex in a small city in Lower Austria with 400 worker apartments from the 1940s. And it's really this, it's not only transformation of the buildings itself, it's really a transformation in a social, in a ecological and an economical sense. So I would understand this word transformation in this process that is not only about architecture or the built environment itself.
Thank you very much. And the reply from Barcelona, and then I see we got some more questions.
Well, I think we have little to add because it was very well explained. I mean, we subscribe our colleagues' opinion about that. Maybe we can go on to the next question.
Okay, Lubica.
I would like to ask Markus, because all of us could notice in presentations one of the values, many of the values, or more of the values, but one was very, very clear, that value of inclusiveness. And this is what I would like to ask Markus. What's the approach of citizens to communities and to creating housing for, let's say, refugees or people who are in a bad situation and in need to have some housing? So what's the approach in Austria?
Mm-hmm. I don't have a perfect overview of the approaches in Austria in the broad sense. But what's quite important for me is this different scales now of help or of solidarity. When you, as an individual or as a family, you have very little possibilities sometimes to help in a broader sense. In terms of society, of the government, you have a very broad approach, or you can have very broad approaches, and every country has different approaches and different how much they want to help. Yeah, but what I want to say is what's interesting to me, or what's my main interest in, is this level in between. So this level of communities, of communities, for example, co-housing communities, associations, so of these civil organizations consisting of 50, 100, 200 people. So on this scale, you have a very, in my opinion, you have a very easily to organize and a very concrete possibility to be helpful to refugees or to other people in need. Because you don't have to bear it on your own shoulders as an individual, everything, and you can share this obligation and this work to care about, I don't know, Syrian refugees, Ukrainian refugees, together with others in everyday life.
Thank you. And I will thank also to the audience, because we have now many questions, so perhaps the answers should be a little bit shorter.
Yes or no?
So the first question is, what are relations between owner of site and your project? Do you always use sites in city ownership? How cooperation between municipality and studio began? So it's very hard to say yes or not.
Yeah,
but
no. Okay, let's try to be. Okay, most of the time we're negotiating with the municipality, but not always. Sometimes we're working with NGOs or cooperatives or other associations that own a building or have the right to use the building to expand it, transform it, or whatever. So we're open to all situations, or also with even private developers, but this happens less.
Yes. Brno?
Can I, the start of the question? I was actually thinking about the second part, how it starts that you're actually working with the municipality. The municipality is an organism, right? It has plenty of bodies, plenty of departments, changing, renewing every 4 years. And you have a topic, you just work on a certain topic, and suddenly one of the department is kind of resonating with your topic, and that's how they find a way to you. They say, hey, can you actually give us a consultancy? Actually, we have a project. Actually, maybe it's good to meet with the mayor. So my way to actually get to the municipality is to have a topic and make it strong.
Thank you. And Markus?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, for me, it's very crucial, this ownership question. So I would answer this question that we always look for collective ownership in some sense. So it can be collective ownership of the site itself and then the building, which can be thought together but can be separate. A collective ownership by a non-profit developer, or by the city, the municipality itself, or by an association or corporation. And we really don't do this kind of projects for people looking for, in a German sense of understanding Baugruppen, like it is in Berlin or in Hamburg sometimes. We don't do it for individual ownership, because with individual ownership, you cannot prevent speculation.
Thank you. Next question, Lubica.
Here is the question for Alexandra and Tomáš. Do you still follow the development in the distillery after you moved out? Does the owner keep with the social aspects? Have they consulted with you?
Not quite. That's quite a yes and no answer. There was different directions. We wanted to improve the building by adding one more level of apartment and residential. And once he asked for a higher rent, we said, okay, we can give you more money for the rent, but you need to invest into the building yourself a little bit as well, because at that point he didn't invest into it at all. So we asked kind of a return to change the entrance and the corridor passage, and there was no answer. So that kind of how it ended, the collaboration. And at this point, we don't know. Do we know what's happening?
They are just like using the yard, which we kind of cleaned up. We put there some furniture, which was actually made from some material that we found in the distillery. So it was basically theirs. And now there is a cafe that is using the yard, but it's not part of what once used to be a distillery. And as far we know that it seems that the building is going to collapse because they really don't care for it.
But the community lived on. So I think this is a good impact that it continued somewhere else in the Kunst project.
Yes, and you say Kunst or Kumst?
It's combination of Kunst and Kumst, so they turn it into Kunst. It's not a mistake, it's their decision.
Okay. It's
a nice mistake.
The Czech and Slovaks, they understand the difference between Kunst and
Okay,
Kunst.
another two questions
Yeah.
for guests for Barcelona. Why haven't you built it as a wooden construction, but a living environment plus significant reduction of CO2 footprint impact is behind this question.
I mean, if you want to comply all the regulations, you need to use a really thick celluloid wood, and it's really expensive actually. Like if you compare with the reuse of containers. Also, a probe is part of a program by the municipality, which is like now they're building another buildings under this program, and it's always with containers. So it was a decision.
But now, for example, now we're building, after this building, which is a mixture between containers and wood, now we're building a new one, which is strictly wood. So we kind of...
Great information. And another also for you. How was the project close to Rambla communicated with the neighbors, locals? What was the reaction to the construction on a kind of local public square?
Yeah, well, in fact, it was not a square. It was a space that, when you saw the photograph, you may think that was a public space, but like half of it was a public lot for building. But of course, they were using it as a public square, and there were two kinds of reactions. I mean, most of the people are very much aware about the housing problem, so they were for the housing. But we had like a part of the neighbors that were they wouldn't give up this some 100 meters or something like this, 100 square meters. So there was a bit of a struggle. But it's also a struggle that it happens a lot. It's sometimes people use this concept of losing public space to, in fact, say, not in my backyard. I don't want poor people living in front of my... So it was a bit complex, and it happened again in other projects.
Yes, it's also in Slovakia, I would say. I'm
Okay,
sorry to say that.
Markus, now the question for you from Oliver. Is there a third-party investor in the co-housing, or are the owners the sole investors? Did they also sell some apartments to cover initiative costs?
It was developed together with a non-profit developer, the Schwarzer Tal, and they financed everything, the whole construction site and the site itself during the building process. And then before moving in, before this association of the users, they moved in, they sold the whole project as a piece, the whole thing, the whole house, to the association. But there was no third-party investor. So the association of the users, they own everything, the whole building together.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a question from Zora for two cities, Barcelona and Vienna. Did you have facilitator or process leader for participation? If you did it yourself, how did it change as you as an architect?
Well, traditionally we've been doing ourselves, but recently, as we are able to, sometimes we hire some experts, but traditionally we've been doing ourselves because we've been working in a kind of a radically participatory architecture since we started. So we're very much used to it. We started to do as architecture, participation as soon as we started to do architecture. So it flows. It's really... But of course, we appreciate the presence of experts like sociologists and mediators.
I don't know if there are some professors from a local school of architecture. Did the education of architects change? Because I am not there. yes. But in between, I see there is no answer from audience. So if you have an answer on both questions, please, Marcus.
Yeah, maybe it's the same here in Vienna, as David mentioned in Barcelona. We started to do all the participatory processes ourselves. And now we more frequently cooperate with sociologists and mediators. And how did this work influence our understanding of our role? I think I mentioned it a little bit in the presentation, but we never tried to start to design anything because before we have worked with the group and before we get the vision and the goals and the program clear. So we really force ourselves not to design anything too early. That's maybe the biggest change.
Thank you very much, Marcus. We have several questions here. I'm afraid it will take too much time, so we have to choose some. Peter, you are responsible for this.
Okay, so the winner is Tomáš. I would like to ask all presenters how they incorporate measures to reduce operating energy or renewable energy in their projects. So about costs, operating energy and renewable energy.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I will try to give a short answer about specifically the last project we saw, because it's the project we're building right now, and it's a project that introduces some, like on one side, it drastically reduces the demands. So we need little energy. On the other side, it has this kind of captors, like the skylights we were seeing, that are kind of during the winter and sending hot air downstairs. But on the other side, we will have like solar cells on the rooftop. So at the end, the building has to be at least neutral, and also. If we talk about embedded energy in the materials, we're using shipping containers that are already used, and you're using wood, so it's also a low rate of embedded energy somehow. And everything is demountable, reversible, so you can recycle all the thing again. Sorry, it was a bit long.
In our case, like every project is in a little bit different environment. We are using a consultancy company that is actually doing for us all this kind of sustainability schemes. So we're trying always to apply the best possible solution. But what is like for us, like this kind of little cherry on the cake is the water, like the reuse of the water, reuse of the grey water, reuse of the rainwater. Retention, the ability to actually work with the base of the building to collect it somewhere. These are topics that we're like always trying to push a little bit farther. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I think like again, as I spoke about, the topic is one of the topics that we're like trying to make a profound and eventually find new schemes how to work with it. So electricity. Heating, this is something that we are like working with consultancies and see what is the financial feasibility. Water we're pushing a little bit farther.
Thank you. And Marcus?
I'm afraid I didn't get the question.
I already deleted it, but it's done. But the question was about regeneration and alternative energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my colleagues answered a lot of it. I think we really need a broad approach to it, regenerative questions. So we really have to care about how to switch from this being in the cradle-to-cradle approach from Michael Braungart from Germany. We really have to be able to switch from this making the work we do or the things we do not only less harmful for our world, but we have to be able to make a a positive impact on ecology, and it needs a very broad approach on regenerative questions from water to soil to CO2 and everything. Yeah.